make. Okay, so we've been talking about handling money right. So I want to start this morning with reiterating some stuff about the big guiding principles. Remember, I was talking about the big guiding principles. There's some big principles, and then there's some specific things that we are told to do. It's not an exhaustive study in the sense of I've not looked at every single bit of scripture about finances. Okay, I have done, but I'm not preaching that. Okay, we've picked out some big principles and some major things that we need to attend to. Not every single thing that Jesus said about money. Okay, there's a lot more, but they're basically attended to in the things we've looked at so far. They've been attended to. Okay, so here are the big principles. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 and 20, you may open to it or you don't have to open to it. It's up to you entirely. So I'll be going quite quick at the beginning anyway. Matthew 6, 19 and 20. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in. But store up treasures in heaven for yourself. I want you to note, for yourself. We get to each have a responsibility for what we do and what we manage to accomplish for yourselves. Okay? But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and thieves do not break in. So, the big principle here is do not store up, but store up. Do you remember when we were dealing with that over a couple of weeks? Do not store up, but store up. We have to apply the same measure, the same understanding to those two terminologies. In the same way that I do not store up something that is material here, and it says, but store up in heaven, must be referring to that same material thing. You can't just simply switch principles in the middle. And I've demonstrated that through the weeks. Okay? But again, we'll look at it now. So we look at Luke chapter 12. He gives us an example in verses 13 to 24 of this man who had bumper harvest. He's been a successful man, really successful. And this season again, very successful. I remember the story. And what did he do? He said, I will break down my barns, build bigger ones, store everything in there. Now my soul can take its ease. And God said to him, really? Tonight I demand of you your spirit and your soul. And that night he went. Okay? And what does it say about that guy? In verse 21, why? Jesus said, so is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Okay? The person who stores up treasure just for themselves and is not rich towards God, is not generous towards God, will be just like that guy. A demand will be made of his soul in a way that he cannot respond to. But then in verse 15, speaking to the people in Luke chapter 12 still, Jesus said, be alert and guard your heart from every form of greed and from always wishing for what you don't have. For your life can never be measured by the amount of things you possess. And this is what led to that parable of the man with the barns, because somebody had interrupted his speech. If you read Luke chapter 12 carefully and 11, Jesus was talking to them about very spiritual stuff. And somebody had interrupted him with, Master, tell my brother to share stuff with me. And Jesus like, if it was me, I'd be like, excuse me, is that what we're talking about here? Really? Is that what you got out of all I've been saying? And Jesus turned to his disciple and said, be alert and guard your heart from every form of greed, because it will interrupt your spirituality in ways that you never thought of. Just be alert and from always wishing for what you don't have. Somebody will say to me, but what about godly ambition? Okay. Well, something about that, but that's not what we're talking about today. Actually, the word ambition is only ever used in the negative sense in the New Testament. It's never used in the positive sense. Okay, the book of Proverbs teaches us how to multiply, how to do this, you can describe that as ambition, how to get better at things. But really, what we call ambition today, generally, I say, it's not approved of by scriptures, because it will undercut somebody. It's usually unethical. But yeah, lest I get distracted. But it says, be alert and guard your heart. Be alert and guard your heart. So, big principle number 1, do not store up, but store up. Big principle number 2, be alert. Be alert and guard your heart from every form of greed. There are various forms of greed. Just be alert. Guard your heart. The Message translation says, protect yourself against the least bit of greed. The least bit. So there's no point me comparing myself to you and saying, well, at least I'm less greedy than Julie, I must be doing all right. I'm less greedy than Rena, I must be doing all right. There's no point comparing. It says the least bit of greed. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. That's a little yeast in flour will go through the whole lump by the morning or whatever. All you need is a little. Guard yourself against the least bit. The NIV says, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. The Berean version says, against every form of greed. So we're talking about all kinds, every form, the least bit, all types of greed. Be alert. And it will be useless or moot for Jesus to be saying, be alert about something that you think you're immune to. Okay? So don't no Christian tell me now that I don't have a greed problem. You may not have it, but be alert about it. Okay. Right, moving on then. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. You may open to this one. We looked at this one briefly a few weeks ago, but we didn't really stop there too much. I want to stop there a bit today. All in line with the finances. Hebrews 13. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. I will read from the Amplified, which is not much different to yours, but it actually just amplifies a little of what we're reading. Hebrews 13, verse 5. And mark this, friends. These are things that I'm wrestling with as well. This is stuff that I'm thinking about, meditating on, praying about my life, about what can I do? How much more can I be true to this? Remember, because disciples don't just update, they execute, they embrace. How can I embrace this more than I did last year when I last looked at the subject? How can I be a better disciple about this? So we all have that responsibility. So Hebrews 13 says, let your character or moral disposition be free from the love of money, including greed, avarice, lust, and craving for earthly possessions. Okay, we all know what craving feels like, I think. Okay, there are days when I finished a whole packet of biscuit just at one sitting, it's like irresistible. There are days when I just feel, I want this thing and I don't know why. And often I just go and fulfill that craving. I just go and do it. Usually to do with food. Okay? We know what craving is like. Sometimes I crave company as well of particular people. But often they're too far away from me, so I give them a video call rather than just a voice call. We know what craving is. So it says, let your character or moral disposition be free from the love of money, from the craving for earthly possessions. And if we're honest with ourselves, there are times that we have craved earthly possessions. Not just wanted, not just needed, but actually craved. As in, I'm going to have that if I have to break a bank for it. I'm going to have that. Nothing's going to stop me from having that. Be alert. Be alert. And it says, be satisfied with your present circumstances and with what you have. Be satisfied with what you have. That is I'll admit to you, it's a fairly difficult one to manage in a culture or an age that always promoting more as a sign of success. And Jesus is saying, and the scriptures are saying, be happy with what you have. Does it say make more? Well, we looked at that last week, and I'll touch on it briefly again later on. Yes. There are parables that talk about trading. He gave them this, he gave them that, and he gave them that, and he expected more. And the guy that buried his one, he told him, said, the least you could have done is given it to the bank, and I'll have interest when I come back. So definitely the Bible teaches that we should multiply. That's not the issue. Multiplication is a natural, eternal principle. Everything you plant is supposed to multiply. It's just what's supposed to happen. Craving is another matter entirely. Craving is what leads people to genetic modifications. Not just planting and letting it grow and multiply. No, we have to modify it so that a tree that's meant to bear only 100 fruits can now bear 500 at the same time. Now that, I think, would be synonymous to craving. It's just an illustration, by the way. I'm not having a whack at genetics, modifying people, geneticists, okay? I'm just using an illustration here. Let your character and moral disposition be free of that. My character and moral disposition must be free of that. You got to say ouch sometimes. And it gives us a reason. It says, for God himself has said, and this is the confidence, friends, God himself has said, I will not in any way fail you, nor give you up, nor leave you without support. I will not in any degree leave you helpless, nor forsake, nor let you down and relax my hold on you. Assuredly not, I will not forsake you. This is what God is saying to us. This is how and why we can be free of this sort of cravings. Every form of greed. This is why I can put in the right amount of mileage on my mileage sheet when I could easily increase each submission by a few more miles and justify it. And justify it. Not because I can't get away with it, but because it shows that I'm trusting God, or doing the opposite shows that I actually don't trust God. When I rip people off, when I undercut people, when I do all this stuff, it shows I actually don't trust God to meet my needs. It's a funny way, it's an interesting way to look at it, but that's what the Bible is teaching. It says, for God has said that I will not fail you or leave you without support. If I truly believed that, I would never have to rip anybody off. I would never have to shortchange anybody. Because what's the point of that? It's to meet my needs, right? But God said, I will not forsake you. I will never leave you. So verse 6 says, so we take comfort and we are encouraged and confidently and boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be seized with alarm. I will not fear or dread or be terrified. What can man do to me? And that's quoting from Psalm 27. The Lord is my helper. Is my answer to every material need or material temptation. Every time I feel like I should undercut somebody, I should shortchange somebody, I should overwrite my receipt, my answer to that is the Lord is my helper. Every time I feel like that person is not deserving of my goodness or my mercy, somebody that is asking something from me, that is actually in need, My answer is the Lord is my helper. Because I'm supposed to be open-handed. The Bible says that don't tell your neighbor to go and come back tomorrow when what he's asking you for is actually within the power of your hand to do today. The Lord is my helper. The Lord is my helper. The Lord is my helper. Let's look at another story in this roundup in Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. All very linked, because it was in Luke 12 that he was saying, be alert and guard your heart from every form of greed. And in Luke 12:22, he said to his disciples, for this reason, I say to you, don't worry about your life as to what you will eat, nor for your body as to what you will put on. We've looked at this before. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap. They have no storeroom nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more valuable you are than the birds. So when I say to myself, the Lord is my helper, I also say to myself, I am much more valuable than these birds, these ravens, these blackbirds out there. And sometimes I watch them from the kitchen window upstairs, and they bring in huge lumps of food and go into that guy's roof space, and I think they must be breathing in there regularly. I wonder what it looks like in there, you know. You know, since we moved here, they've been going in and out of that place. They've been going in and out, especially breeding nesting season. You see them carrying these sticks, and they're trying to get it in. That's where you see the intelligence and persistence of some of these creatures. Some of them don't stop until they get that thing in. It will fall, she'll go down and get it, come back up and start, and finally she's in with the stick. And I think, oh gosh, when we first moved here, and I went in the loft space, do you remember? It's like, what the heck's been going on in this loft space? It was full of sticks. It was full of branches. I was thinking, what's been going on here? Until I saw what was going on across the road. And I thought, all right, they have an access in here. Then we looked around everywhere, and we had this loft installation people come in, and they blocked some places and whatnot. But you know, God provides for these birds. I am much more valuable than the ravens. That's what Jesus. Help me, Lord. If we can just believe this. If I can just believe this. If I can just believe this. If I can just believe this, Jesus. It saved me so much pain. It saved me so much hassle. Okay. And which of you by worrying can add a single hour to his lifespan? We all know about that, right? We all know about the guy who built his house, who tried very hard, worked really hard, made every money, built it, and then the next year he dies. Or the same month he finds that he's got cancer. I have met so many people with so many stories that you think, wow, how did that happen? Not to mention the one we've read about the guy with the barns. Listen, we can't add an hour to your life. Only God can. If then you cannot even do a very little thing, why do you worry about other matters? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. But I tell you, not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass in the field, which is alive today, and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more will he clothe you? I really want to live like this. Like God actually cares for me. Because That's the bottom line of that testimony when I live like this, is saying God actually cares for me. They're good stories, they're good illustrations, they're good parables, but they don't mean much till we live them. That God actually cares for me. And I stop working as if I care for me more than God cares for me. Do you hear what I'm saying? I stop stressing as if I could possibly care for me more than God cares for me. That's the point of these stories. It's supposed to bring us life. Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. How can we have full life if we're constantly constrained and restrained and driven as if we can add an hour to our own lives? As if we can actually provide for our own selves. This is the point. He labors on these stories. You say, why would a Jesus be telling these sort of elementary stories to his disciples? There's a point, friends. And do not seek what you will eat, verse 29, and what you will drink. And do not keep worrying. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek. But your Father knows that you need these things. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom. This is where we are supposed to live. Okay, so don't be afraid, little flock. Your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom. Don't be afraid. Don't be stressing so much about how are we going to make it? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? There's a way in which we plan and still have trust in God. But there's a way in which we plan as well and behave as if we are actually going to make it happen. Jesus says, avoid that. Then in case we're in any doubt as to some of what he's saying, this whole don't store up and be alert and guard your heart. In verse 33, he says of same Luke 12, sell your possessions and give to charity. Make yourselves money belts which do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven. So when he's saying put your treasure in heaven, in case we're confused as to how to make that happen, he tells you how to make it happen. Convert your goods now, okay? And spread it around. Spread it around. That comes with its own fears. How much of my goods am I really supposed to flog off and spread around? We are going to have to decide that prayerfully between ourselves and God. He says, but that's how you get your treasure, by spreading it around. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And the same he said to the rich young ruler in Matthew 19. He said, if you want to be perfect, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. So we're no longer in doubt as to how to get treasure in heaven, how to put treasure in heaven. We're no longer in doubt. It's about giving to the poor. It's about supporting the kingdom of God, being rich towards God. It's not only about praying. It's not only about evangelism. It's not only about studying. It's about doing some very physical, material things that affect us and make us trust in God. We're in no doubt about that anymore. Question now is, how much of it am I going to do? How much of it am I going to do? We covered some of that last week. Once all your basic needs are met that he said he would meet, everything else is fair game. Yes? So, a quick recap. Handling money right. We work and earn to meet our own needs. You work hard, you make money, you meet your own needs. That's what the Bible says. The Bible teaches. You can refer to the previous messages. It also says you can enjoy your life. Eat well, drink well, enjoy your clothing, enjoy your life with what you make. We'll find that in the book of Ecclesiastes. Teaches us that it's a good thing for a man to enjoy the fruit of his labor. Okay? Enjoy your life. Pay your bills, enjoy your life. Go on holidays, buy a horse. Whatever, whatever. But at the same time, be prepared to sell the horse if necessary. Okay? Don't hold so tightly onto these things, but enjoy your life.
Can I buy the horse on credit?
We're not encouraged to buy horses on credit. No. Okay? What we're supposed to do is work hard and make money to buy the things we need to buy. Work hard, make money, not use credit. Is credit a sin? It can be, just like anything can be a sin. Can eating be a sin? Yes. Can drinking become a sin? Yes. Can sex be a sin? Yes. Credit can be a sin. It's not always. The Bible talks about borrowing, lending, repaying, and they're not always held to us as sinful things. Okay? But the primary thing is work hard, make the money, enjoy your life, and once all your basic needs are met, everything else applies as fair game in line with a few things that we're going to look at now. Okay? The foundation, general foundations of biblical giving. The first bit of the fair game is, well, actually, this comes before really thoroughly enjoying your life, is honoring God and worshiping God. Why do I say so? Because Proverbs 3:9 says, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of your produce, so your barns will be filled. Glorify God, honoring him with your very best. So he's the first and foremost of our considerations when we earn money and we make money.
What did you say about God?
Proverbs 3. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9. Okay? We're glorifying God, we're honoring God, and then we see the example of Abraham worshiping God by giving his most precious possession, which was his son. It's not really about the tithing, like I always say. It's about how much do you think you owe God? How much do you think is really given to you? So we've looked at that. We honor God like that. Dealt with it in more detail in the previous sessions. So what else did we look at? Wages for pastors and teachers. You shall not muzzle the ox that threshes the corn. Pastors, teachers, ministers in the gospel deserve to be paid a wage wherever possible. Okay? So like I was saying last week, all that money belongs to me. Well, doesn't have paid my wage, but it's a wage. We deserve a wage. Then benevolence and eradication of poverty from the church. Okay, we looked at eradication of poverty from the church. We all read last week, Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 4. We also looked at benevolence, First Corinthians 16 and 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. We actually did not look at last week, so I want to look at it today. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. All of 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and chapter 9 were written in order to raise funds. In order to raise funds. Funds for what? For the meeting of the needs of the Christians that were going through a difficult time. But I want us to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8, in particular verses 1 to 5. 2 Corinthians 8, 1 to 5. You are never too poor to give. Beloved ones, I'm reading from the Passion now. Beloved ones, we must tell you about the grace God poured out upon the churches of Macedonia. Grace. He refers to it as grace. For even during a season of severe difficulty, tremendous suffering, and extreme poverty, their superabundant joy overflowed into an act of extravagant generosity. Right? That's verse 2. Can I have somebody read verse 2 from another translation, please?
Yeah, it says here in the New International Version, this one.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of a severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity.
Yeah? Extreme poverty, overflowing joy. Have you ever seen those two things going together? Not in all the documentaries you've watched, right?
No.
Okay, any other translation? Verse 2.
King James says,
Yes.
that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality.
Wow. Great trial of affliction, extreme poverty, abundant liberality. Those things are things we don't usually combine. Yet, Paul is using it as an example to encourage the Corinthians who had made a pledge a while back, and they were very slow in fulfilling that pledge. So he's saying to them, guys, what you said you were going to do a while ago, you need to just complete it. Look at these guys. Look at what these guys did. The churches in Macedonia. And he called it grace. Grace. Season of severe difficulty, tremendous suffering, extreme poverty, linked together with superabundant joy that is overflowing in an act of extravagant generosity. How much can a poor person give, for goodness sake? Extravagant generosity. They're talking poor people here. But then, didn't Jesus say that the widow's mite was much more than that other guy's giving? It was all that she had. That's why it was much more. You're never too poor to give. Verse 3 says, for I can verify that they spontaneously gave, not only according to their means, but far beyond what they could afford. I can just imagine husband and wife or the family in the house saying, we've got to support those other Christians in Macedonia. They're really hungry. They're really going, things are terrible over there. And they say, okay. I've worked it out, and we've got this extra bag of cereal here, and we've got this extra pot of oil here and whatnot. Yes, we can give that to them. And then somebody goes, but we can still get cereal next week. Give them some more. give them some more. We could probably still make it. We don't know if they could. That's what's being said here. Not only according to their means, but far beyond what they could afford. Some of these guys would have fasted just to give food to those who needed it. So sometimes when we think of basic needs, I was talking earlier on, once your basic needs are met, then everything's fair game. But even the basic need itself needs to be questioned sometimes. Needs to be questioned sometimes. What's so basic? When last did I go without food entirely for a whole day? I'll answer that for you for myself. It's been a long time. I mean, I could go the whole day. I mean, I've done it, but I can go, generally I would go the whole day and just eat only dinner around 6, 7 and then the next day till then. But when I did actually go without entirely, or do that because I want to send what I didn't eat or the value of it to somebody else. Isn't this the fast that I have commanded, that you lose the bonds of affliction? That's what Isaiah says about fasting. But anyway, this is an example of what we call extreme giving. They actually begged us, verse 4, they actually begged us for the privilege of sharing in this ministry of giving to God's holy people who were living in poverty. They begged us, poor people in extreme poverty, begging the apostles, saying, you've got to take our stuff. No, you guys are poor. Don't you dare say that to us. Don't you dare. You've got to take our stuff. How dare you? Don't you find that a bit challenging? Verse 5, they exceeded our expectations by first dedicating themselves fully to the Lord and then to us according to God's pleasure. And that's the key. Fully dedicating themselves to the Lord and then to us. They dedicated themselves to the Lord first, fully, number one. But it doesn't stop there. They also dedicated themselves to this particular apostle. They said, Apostle Paul, we trust you. We believe your report. We trust that everything you're saying is true. And we appreciate all your input into our lives through the years. Therefore, we're going to support your vision. We're not just supporting your breakfast and dinner. We're supporting your vision. It was Paul's vision that nobody should go without. Okay, so I wanted to just highlight that little bit to say nobody's too poor to give, by the way. So don't ever reject a poor person's gift. You don't know what vows they've made with God. Even if you're going to pass that gift on to someone else because you don't need it, don't reject a poor person's gift. They've thought it through. Trust me. When poor people give, they've thought it through. They've thought it through. This could be tomorrow's breakfast, lunch, dinner. I used to be quite shy about receiving a gift from a poor person, especially if I go and preach somewhere and somebody says, Pastor, I just want to, come on, you don't have to. And we go this to and fro. Now I just say, thank you, God bless you real good. And I pray for them, and I pray for them, and I take it away. It may be no more to me than 3 bottles of Coke, what they've given me. It may be no more to me than a Uber ride, right? But it means to them what it means to them. Now, pastors should never use that to wind people up and get money from them. And I'm not. Okay, just wanted to highlight that. And also that James says that we should visit the widows and the orphans. And we said that wasn't just about visiting empty-handed. Okay, when you visit them, not so that they spend money on you by making you cups of tea, but you go and visit them so that they remember that you actually came. It's not just your presence, what you brought with you as well. Okay, then we looked at missionary ministry, Luke chapter 8 and Philippians chapter 4. These are voluntary and personal arrangements. In Luke 8, we see that Jesus had people who followed him and gave to his ministry regularly, especially women. And then we talked about women giving, and all this, and out of their own means. We said that it's okay for a woman to have her own means. But these women, even out of their own means, were following Jesus and promoting his ministry. Missionary giving. Philippians chapter 4 again, Paul praying for those who were given to the mission, not just for his own wages, because he made that distinction. In some other places, he talked about wages, but in this particular place, he talked about gifts so that he could live well on the mission field. Okay? 2 different things. So when you consider the Great Commission given by Jesus and Paul's tone and language in Philippians 4, you pretty much end up with an imperative that is something that we should do. It's a responsibility on us. And this is the last point that I didn't get time to make last week. The support of the ministry infrastructure. Someone says, what the heck is that? That's just supporting the ministry infrastructure. We don't have much to support here in terms of infrastructure. We don't have many people to support it. But nevertheless, There are some churches that are in their own right big organizations. They are just a machine. The rightness or wrongness of it is another matter entirely. But things need to be supported. There are equipment that need to be maintained. There are musicians that need to be paid because they work so hard on a weekly basis. They have to come in for rehearsals twice a week. They present such a good way to worship God. There's a fabric of the building. There are mortgages to be paid. Okay? We were once in a church that had to pay a mortgage every month, mortgages to be paid. And when we wanted to build a new building, we had to make a case to head office who were going to underwrite this mortgage if everything fell through, that we were actually capable of, we had the capacity to pay this amount every month. So we went through that whole rigmarole for months before they finally signed it, because if that church failed, head office would have to cover. So they ensured we could, So there's all sorts of things that churches have to go through. Support of ministry infrastructure. This ties in very much to the worship and honor of God principle, as a lot of that income should fulfill this. So a lot of the income that people bring to churches like that should fulfill that ministry infrastructure. However, whatever practical needs that remain to be done as a church should be raised according to the needs of that ministry as agreed by the congregation or the leadership. So what does that mean? So, for instance, a church decides that, or the leadership of the church, because when we say a church decides, it's usually the leadership that decides. They don't bring it to the whole congregation for voting. Just like our government doesn't bring everything to us for voting. We just hear that, gays can now marry. Oh, sorry. We just hear that things can happen. Yeah? Right. So they say, we have decided that it is good. It's a good thing for us to buy a van, to buy a minibus as a church. Buy a minibus, and they make a case for it, so that the minibus can pick people up from here, there, and the other, and do this and do that and do that. Now, I believe such things should be raised from a congregation, not from a place of pressure, but from a place of participation. You say, do you think this is good? If you think this is a good thing, please support it. If you think this is a good thing, support it. We need a new keyboard. This one's broken. 2 keys don't work on it, on the musical keyboard. Please support it. There aren't scriptures to really support that kind of fundraising as such. I know 1 or 2 of my colleagues will disagree with me, but there aren't really. You need to appeal to people's sense of camaraderie. We are in this together type of thing, okay? That sense of camaraderie. Like, I actually challenged somebody about this. At least one person in the past. Probably more than one. And I noticed how they were given. I couldn't but notice. And so one day, I just went up to the person. I said, so when you give like that, what are you doing? So what do I mean? I said, I know exactly how much you give. Oh, yeah. And when you do that, what's in your mind? Because what you gave just now will not buy me a cake and a cup of tea. And I know that you like your cakes and cup of tea. It will not buy you a cake and a cup of tea. So what are you thinking? Okay? It won't even pay for the electric that we use to boil the water. Well, it might do actually. That's a slight exaggeration because that doesn't use that much kilowatt. Anyway, I challenge the person. Say, oh, can you do that? Yeah, I can. Paul did. Don't do it every year. Don't do it everywhere I go. But I can. I'm a minister of God. Absolutely. I'm not asking you to put money in my pocket. I'm challenging your brain. What the heck are you doing? I'll challenge you in the same way if I see you doing something naughty about something else. You can choose whatever you do. And they said, oh, never thought about it like that. And the point of it for me is, even if we treated our congregation just like a golf club, or like a rugby club, or like any other club, people contribute to keep that club going, don't they? Because there are some basic needs that club has. Even if you're not paying the club president, you got to pay other stuff. So that's another thing that happens. And a lot of the giving people bring to church ought to cover that, actually. Ought to cover all those bits and pieces. Ought to, I say. Sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes people do need to be challenged about, how do you think this place actually runs? How do you think this place runs? So for me, all these points we have made, and there are a few more that could be made, but I will stop here, I believe fulfills in the New Testament what the tithe is supposed to do in the Old Testament. If you look at it carefully, all those things are there. Apart from the eat it yourself part, which sometimes we're supposed to do. But then we do come here and eat it ourselves sometimes, and maybe having and sharing meals from house to house. We could do that as well. And that would, in reality, whoever is preparing the meal is actually giving something. So, ladies, that is it on the financial thing, for now anyway. We've covered so many points. They've mostly been recorded. This is part 3 of it. It'll be on YouTube. We can all have a listen again. But let's pray.